House will come to order. Calendar for the day. First bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 550. Clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 550, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to natural resources, the third engrossment.
Call upon the member from Crow Wing to introduce his bill. Representative Heintzeman, would you like to put the House language in before you present your bill?
I would. I would move first to insert the House language. That is my amendment.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Heintzeman moves to amend Senate File number 550, the third engrossment, as follows. The amendment is coded DEA 1265.
I call upon the author of the amendment to introduce the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, this is just some cleanup language, some things we needed to do to make the bill work, and I'd appreciate a green vote, please.
Discussion to the amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor of the DEA 1265 amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Representative Heintzeman, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment is technical. This will change the effective date to 2017 appropriations in this bill. My apologies, Mr. Speaker. Before you today, I have the much anticipated LCCMR bill, House File 1265. Before I explain the bill, I would quickly like to thank the LCCMR staff. They're in the enclave. I'd like to mention that I really appreciate their availability as the legislative process began some months ago. This bill spends just over $59 million over the coming biennium on scores of projects across the state. It helps to fund a significant project, CREP, the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. CREP is a targeted conservation easement program that will help address the concern many farmers have with the governor's buffer law. That being that they are not compensated for their land being taken out of production, and CREP will compensate approximately 90% of the value of land enrolled in a permanent easement. CREP will also be used for wellhead protection, another priority issue for many people in this chamber. In January, Governor Dayton signed the CREP agreement with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and with this agreement, a state investment of $150 million will leverage $350 million from the federal government. This agreement was signed well after the LCCMR had made its recommendations, and not knowing what's going to happen in D.C. during the next budget cycle, we think it's important to secure as much of that federal match as soon as possible. To get that money, we would have to get as much money as we could for CREP. We decided not to fund a number of projects recommended by the LCCMR, as CREP is a high priority. In total, there's approximately $18 million for easements. There's also $6 million that was in the original LCCMR recommendations for SWCDs to assist landowners that participate in CREP. Other highlights in the bill include $3.7 million for the County Geologic Atlas work continuation, $400,000 for groundwater contamination mapping. In Representative Eklund's district, $293,000, to study the effects of wolf predation on beaver, moose, and deer. $263,000 for assessing the impact of household chemicals and herbicides on rivers and lakes, $500,000 for water quality monitoring in southern Minnesota trout streams, $300,000 for a joint project between the University of St. Thomas and the Department of Natural Resources to reassess the toxicity of petroleum spills in groundwater and surface waters. Don't worry, members, I'm almost wrapping it up. $1.2 million for a project connecting youth to Minnesota waterways through outdoor classrooms. I'm also happy to mention a $500,000 project, the Minneopa State Park acquisition in Representative Clark Johnson's district. I'm told the bison need the space. $2.7 million to help the Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center in the University of Minnesota to continue its fine work researching aquatic invasive species. These are just a few highlights of the many projects funded through this LCCMR bill. With that introduction, I look forward to a debate, and I will happily stand for questions.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Heintzeman moves to amend Senate File Number 550, the third engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A11.
Call upon the member from Crow Wing to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a technical amendment that will change the effective date to the 2017 appropriations in this bill. I apologize for earlier mixing up the timing on the amendment.
Discussion to the A11 amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor of adoption of the A11 amendments, please signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hansen moves to amend Senate File Number 550, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A1.
I call upon the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen, to report his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Representative Heintzeman talked about some of the changes that were made to the LCCMR bill. This is Minnesotans' lottery dollars. And I think it's important, Mr. Speaker and members, when we're talking about what was put into the bill, we also recognize what was taken out of the bill. And there seems to be a pattern whenever the Republicans are in charge with the LCCMR, with the lottery dollars. If something has the word climate in it, it's taken out. If something deals with solar, it's taken out. If something deals with lead, it's taken out. And if something deals with science, scientific and natural areas, acquisitions for natural regions, it's taken out. So the A1 amendment is restoring acquisitions. And I would ask for a roll call on the A1 amendment.
A roll call being requested, and seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know there are folks on the other side of the aisle that are sensitive, I guess, to say, about acquisitions. But I think some of that sensitivity is on acquisitions in areas of their districts. The A1 amendment restores Metropolitan Regional Park System land acquisition. It restores scientific and natural area acquisition and restoration. It restores state parks and trails acquisition. And it restores native prairie stewardship and prairie bank easement acquisitions. We don't have much native prairie left in Minnesota. And the dollars that are spent, the limited dollars that are spent on these acquisitions are getting the best to be retained. So I would ask members to look at restoring these fee title acquisitions back into the LCCMR. The Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program is a worthy program. However, the governor did recommend $30 million in capital investment for the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. That's traditionally where those dollars have come from. These scientific and natural areas, parks, trails, and prairie banks are a good investment, and I would ask you for your support for the amendment.
Discussion to the A1 amendment. Member from Crow Wing, Representative Heintzeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, just a quick note. The governor made a number of recommendations in regard to the funding of CREP, and that included the Clean Water Fund as well as a number of other locations. And I think that CREP is an appropriate place. I think the LCCMR is an appropriate place to place some CREP funding. So that's what we're doing. I'd appreciate a no vote on the amendment, please.
Further discussion to the A1 amendment. Member from Hennepin, Representative Wagenius.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think it's right at all to imply that the governor wanted CREP money taken out of LCCMR. What the governor wanted, what the governor proposed, was putting $30 million of bonding in for CREP. $30 million. But there's only 10 now. So the missing 20 is essentially taking it from this package. And I just want to mention a couple of things about this package. It was a compromise package because there were folks representing, or there are folks with lots of different opinions on LCCMR, both legislators and citizens. But the one other thing that the legislators and citizens do in putting the package together is to balance the projects among all the regions of the state. Very careful to make sure that every community has the same opportunities that every other community has. And that's one of the strengths of the LCCMR process. And I would urge members to vote for Representative Hansen's amendment.
Further discussion to the A1 amendment. Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I do want to point out Representative Hansen made the statement that there are people on this side of the aisle that have issues with regards to acquisitions. I can state unequivocally that there are people on the other side of the aisle that have issues with acquisitions as well. Thank you.
Further discussion. A roll call being requested. The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 68 ayes and 73 nays. 60 ayes, 73 nays. The amendment is not adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Flanagan moves to amend Senate File Number 550, the third engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A10.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Flanagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would ask for a roll call on the amendment.
A roll call being requested, and seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you. So what this amendment does is it adds back the University of Minnesota Duluth project to evaluate the microbial communities and nutrients associated with wild rice, so competing with vegetation, with the goal of restoring more wild rice and wild rice habitat. And it's pretty great that we all had these books delivered to us today, our Minnesota Blue Book. And if you turn to page 23, you will find that our state grain is at the top of the page, wild rice. And it mentions that American Indians in this state harvested wild rice for a long time. We still do. And one of the reasons that we landed in Minnesota as Native American people was because we migrated to where food grows on water. And we knew that this would be where our homeland should be established. And so one of the things that I think is great about wild rice or mandomin is that it brings all of us together as Native folks, as non-Native folks, around a shared value of our state grain. And I think we should be doing everything that we can and taking the LCCMR recommendation to study how we can ensure that we maintain wild rice, both for our local economy, but also to ensure that we continue our way of life and ability to harvest it. Thank you.
Discussion to the A10 amendment. Representative Heintzeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'd appreciate a bill as I brought it to the House coming in or going into conference committee, so I'd encourage a no vote.
Further discussion? Seeing none, a roll call being requested, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 74 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. Clerk will report the amendment.
Hornstein moves to amend Senate File Number 550, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A2.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein, to report his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. First of all, I would like to request a roll call on the A2 amendment.
Roll call being requested, and seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. This amendment relates to restoring 6 separate projects that relate to solar energy. They primarily involve research, and this is an important and growing industry in our state. I handed an article out just last week from the Star Tribune indicating that this year alone we have had an 80% increase in solar capacity in Minnesota. And in fact, the article points out that we have gone from 37 megawatts to 447 megawatts of generating capacity just in the last 2 years alone. Some of these projects, XL projects in Marshall and Chisago County, Aurora, these are covering all regions of our state. They're a boon to our economy, and of course, this is clean, renewable energy that not only is good for our economy, but also our environment and helping our state reach our climate reduction or greenhouse gas emission reduction goals to assist in the fight on climate change. So, members, these are projects that involve manufacturing research, battery storage research, looking at how we capture more thermal energy from solar. We have innovations in terms of new kinds of solar panel design, and transmission upgrades, among other projects. University of Minnesota, other partners, Twin Cities campus, also Morris involved in this. So this is truly a example in the LCCMR bill of really tapping Minnesota know-how and Minnesota innovation that really has implications nationally and globally. So we can continue to be a leader in solar. This is what this amendment accomplishes. I hope for your green vote and support for this amendment.
Discussion to the A2 amendment. The member from Dakota, Representative Garofalo.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And first of all, there's a roll call on this amendment, right, Mr. Speaker?
Representative Garofalo, you are correct.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we do get everyone on record on this. So I want to thank my friends in the DFL for continuing your long, rich tradition of coming up with some of the most bizarre ideas in the area of energy. A while back, there was the peak oil theory, the idea that we didn't have any oil left in the world and we were running out, and the DFL marched out lack of science, lack of facts, and pushed that on us. Then they came up with the Made in Minnesota solar program, which I guess nowadays is better described as the Made in Taiwan solar program, because there's really only one manufacturer of these panels where they make them in Taiwan, bring them over here, put some labels and brackets on them. But today, members, we have a new one. We have these solar-powered robots for weed control in the agriculture fields. So members, I would just encourage you to take a look at, on the amendment, page 3, line 15 to 27. If you, maybe you've seen the movie Westworld, the TV show Westworld, and you can imagine all the connotations that come from this. But today, the DFL is standing strong, not for roads, not for bridges, not for tax relief, but for solar-powered robots for weed control. Members, please vote accordingly to what you're consistent with your principles and your party. I expect everyone on this side is going to be voting no. Thank you.
Further discussion. Member from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wanted to remind the body and those watching that these are all projects that were brought through the council and were recommended by the council, bipartisan group, including some citizen members. So it's not some bizarre, crazy idea. It's something that passed through the council and was recommended. Thank you.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to Representative Garofalo's talk about crazy ideas, to someone who has sat through every one of his committee meetings, you know, those in glass houses shouldn't throw stones too far, just so you know. And actually, whether I agree with all of 6 of those or not, I won't bring that up. But the idea that we are looking at how we do robotics in this state is really, really important. Representative Garofalo, I know you like hockey, and I know you like to call yourself a geek, or a sports geek. So would Representative Garofalo yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Mahoney.
Representative Garofalo, do you know which is the largest team sport in the state of Minnesota?
Representative Garofalo.
Lots of answers from the peanut gallery behind me. The first one was weed control. I thought it was trap shooting, Representative Mahoney. I thought trap shooting was now the largest team sport in Minnesota, but I'm willing to stand corrected on that.
Representative Mahoney.
You know, I could ask the gentleman in the speaker's chair, but I'd be inappropriate. It's robotics.
Further discussion. The member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
And just to this, this is a project that was their partners are the University of Minnesota Morris, Toro Company, which is a Minnesota company. This is very important in terms of saving energy on the farm and you know, making it a lot easier to control weeds. And so that's really the purpose of this. Again, fine Minnesota institution, Minnesota Morris and Toro Corporation teaming up on this. Again, the commission approved this. It was fully vetted. And again, this is an example of innovation. Robotics is certainly a serious effort here to move us forward in the agriculture sector. So labor saving and good for the environment. So this is an important project, and I hope you'll continue to vote yes for my amendment.
Further discussion? Member from Crow Wing, Representative Heintzeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just quickly to Representative Hornstein's comments. And I don't know if the representative knows this, but I've actually lived on solar for a time. And I think that solar definitely has its place. In this particular location, we're 2.5 miles off grid, and we will be there for weeks at a time. And on some days, like for example, when it's cloudy, you don't do laundry. You use that power very carefully. And you know, right here, we're in a situation, unfortunately, we're late in the process. Once the LCCMR committee had gone through and made their recommendations, along comes this other priority, and it is important, and I would unfortunately ask members to vote no to the amendment.
Further discussion? Seeing none and a roll call being requested, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 73 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Bly moves to amend Senate File Number 550, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A3.
I call upon the member from Rice to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Speaker. So this amendment would restore funding for a research that would analyze climate data to aid local planning and implementation efforts. As we notice the heavy rains falling, and I don't know if you're hearing from some of your communities about concerns about flooding, but I am, and we've seen changes over the years in our rainfall. I also attended a conference several years ago with Greenlands and Blue Waters, and there was a presentation by a fellow from the USDA, John Baker, who said as farmers look at climate change coming our way, many of them might be thinking about longer growing seasons or whatever, but the most disruptive part of climate change is going to be rainfall and the way it's going to affect our water systems with floods and with droughts. And we need to understand those changes better. And so this research conducted at the University of Minnesota would try to better understand how climate change will be affecting many of the livelihoods that rely on climate and water and rainfall and weather. Climate trends are variable around the state and need to be understood with greater detail. This project would use the best available information to better predict climate trends on a more detailed geographic scale. It would not predict weather on a daily basis, but would look at trends in climate change. Having up-to-date trends in climate help farmers select the most suitable crops, crop rotations, nutrient management, pest management, planting, harvesting schedules, and even storage and marketing strategies. We also know that climate and change is affecting the migratory birds, which could also affect avian flu. We also know that it can affect other kinds of influenza and other things as we see changes happening in livestock elsewhere as well. So, by the way, I ask for a roll call on this amendment.
A roll call being requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
So I think this is a very, very important amendment. I think this research affects many of our outstates and rural districts, as well as smaller communities who need to prepare for the kinds of things that will be coming our way with climate change. So I hope that you will consider reinstating this research funding and ask for your support and a green vote. Thank you.
Discussion to the A3 amendment. Representative Grunhagen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise in opposition to this amendment and the global warming and so-called climate change, what I believe to be a scam, okay? I continue to read articles from both sides. This past summer, I read a book by 3 PhDs who are eminently qualified to evaluate climate or global warming, so-called scientific data. One was a climatologist, the other was an environmental scientist, and the third one was a physicist. The title of their book is Why Scientists Disagree About Global Warming. They basically discredit the major arguments, so-called scientific arguments about global warming, but I'll just touch on two. First is the 97% consensus and where that came from. There was a survey sent out to scientists back in 2008. Approximately 10,237 scientists in the U.S. received that survey. It had 2 questions on it. 3,146 of the scientists actually responded to the survey, or about 30%. Of those 3,146 scientists, 97% supported the global warming theory. So that's where the 97% comes from. It is not a global consensus, nor is it a majority of the scientists. The other thing they brought out quite clearly in this book, and I have a couple copies if anybody'd like to read it, is that between 2010 and 2013, the U.S. government subsidized global warming research with $64 billion, members. And what they bring out is that government money is corrupting the scientific method. In other words, the funding is used to promote research based on a political agenda. Now, this is not just my opinion. Stanford researchers have uncovered data and information on how scientists are corrupting and lying about their research in order to obtain government subsidies. Finally, members, we're called climate deniers. Well, I would say that the scientists that go after these government grants to come up with so-called global warming research are climate liars, okay? As far as predicting weather, if you ask one of them to predict what the weather will be 3 months from now, they can't do it. But they pretend to be able to predict what the weather patterns would be 20 years from now. It's a UN scam and lie, and I would urge members to vote down anything that even smells of the global warming climate change scam. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Considine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Garofalo, I see is off the field. What was it he was saying about crazy ideas?
The member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Gruenhagen yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Gruenhagen, I just want to make sure I understood. It sounds like you're saying that if folks in the chamber acknowledge that climate change is real and is caused by human activity, they should vote in favor of this amendment. And if they vote against this amendment, then that's a sign that they agree with you and with what you're saying about climate change. Is that, am I understanding you correctly?
Representative Gruenhagen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Pinto, for that question. No, what I'm saying is that the scientific data by those scientists who have exposed and opposed the so-called global warming or climate change theory do not believe that the overwhelming evidence supports that. So it's not agreeing with me, it's agreeing with the scientists who expose the lies and deceit of the IPCC, the United Nations, and also the so-called scientists who get government grants to come up and manipulate the data to make it look like it's a global warming problem. Thank you.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Representative Gruenhagen, if I'm understanding you correctly, the things that you just said, people who vote red are indicating that they agree with those points about what you're saying about those scientists. But if people believe that climate change is, in fact, if they acknowledge that climate change is real and caused by humans, then in fact they would vote green on this amendment, if he will yield.
He will yield. Representative Gruenhagen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I'm just saying that the climate changes every day all over the world. Okay.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So members, I think it's clear. In addition to, I want to make sure we're clear that the past few amendments that have brought up, these are projects that have been recommended by the citizens and legislators who spent a ton of time saying that this is how this money should be spent. This has been the consensus in past years with past legislatures. We generally accept those recommendations. I believe those have been accepted by the other body, if I can make reference to that. For some reason, last term and this term, we haven't been accepting those recommendations for several projects. This is one of those that was recommended, and I think we should follow Representative Gruenhagen's point. If you believe that climate change is, if you acknowledge that it's real and caused by human activity, and if you want to follow the recommendations of those people who we've asked to do this, you're going to vote green. If you vote no, then it sounds like you're disagreeing and you're agreeing with Representative Gruenhagen's points and what he has to say about the science regarding this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion. Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. There is a difference between weather and climate, and I hope Representative Gruenhagen discovers that someday. But I hear from farmers that they want to know what's happening in our climate. They want to know so that they can prepare and get the crops in the ground that are best for the kinds of things that they can be thinking ahead, years ahead perhaps, to know what to predict. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with climate change, and I think scientists can help us get a better understanding so we're better prepared for that. Thank you. Please vote green.
The member from Sherburne, Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I would like to rise, speak against this amendment. I was on the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources last session, and we had an amendment that was similar to strip this type of language out. And I was asked to carry that amendment. And I did some research on this, just on how many times we've studied this. What the amendment here says, what Representative Bly would like to reinsert, is $411,000 to the University of Minnesota to produce localized climate information for statewide planning and implementation. Members, it doesn't take long to research this spending habit to find out that when I researched it last session, this kind of a study has been funded or sought after about every 8 months for about the last 6 years. If they can't figure this thing out, why are we keep throwing money down this hole? I think there's a better way to spend this money than to keep refunding the same studies over and over and over again. Now, members, this might be a little different if there was a large bubble over our state, but the air that's over China today is air that's over Minnesota about a week later. We don't live inside a bubble, that's just Minnesota. So having localized climate studies that cost this much money that we're trying to fund every 6 to 8 months, if you go back and look at it, I can get you the data offline if you want. We just keep pouring money into this for what? So members, it's a fiscally responsible thing to say no to this amendment.
The representative from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, I concur with Representative Neuberger here. We are chasing our tails with this expenditure of money, and members, tens of billions of dollars have been spent federally to chase this around and think that we as men and women are going to actually come up with a conclusion as to exactly what's going on in our environment, and then the audacity to predict what it's going to be tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, would Representative Bly yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Bly, can you tell us, okay, so you are proposing that we spend $411,000 of people's money to somehow, as far as I can tell, something around planning for local implementation efforts, somehow forecasting or maybe divining, I don't know what the future climate will be. How is this research in any way going to be able to tell us what the climate's going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, or 10 years from now?
Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Representative Drazkowski, for the question. Well, first of all, they use models to study climate far into the future. That's how they were able to, at first, to predict that we were in trouble and that we needed to do something about it. So, and it is something that's ongoing. It's not something that you just sort of study and then you know everything that's going to happen. We don't know everything that's going to happen. But we are already experiencing climate change now. It's happening. And it's important that we understand how it's changing and how we adjust to those changes. And those changes are particular to different parts of our state. They're not necessarily going to be the same everywhere in the state or everywhere in the world. But we're concerned about what's happening in Minnesota and happening to our constituents. And so when farmers come and they say, we want to know what to plan for, what's going to happen, or when cities come and say, are we going to continue to have these kinds of rain storms or these kinds of impacts that we face? And what can we do to prepare for them? What are the long-term trends that you study, the models that you look at, going to tell us about what's going to happen to our climate? It's not the same as weather. You know, we also use models to predict the weather from 1 week to the next or whatever it might be. But you look at the long-term changes and what's happening and many impacts are changing that climate as well. So the warming temperature and what that will do. I think one of the things that we've gathered is that there is more extreme weather that follows those climate changes, and we need to prepare for that and understand that better. And it's ongoing research. It's not something that you just figure out one time.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Bly, I didn't think I really heard an answer in there, just that scientists are going to somehow model based on what our past was and then somehow predict from that. With this $411,000 of the people's money, of course, on top of the billions more that have been spent federally and the billions more that have been spent in this state and others collectively, but that they're somehow going to be able to model or predict the future. Well, Representative Bly, the scientists in the 80s said the same thing when they were talking about global cooling and trying to predict from the reductions in temperatures that they were experiencing then and modeling those. Representative Bly, members, many of us wonder about this. We wonder about, is the left just chasing their ideology with this or what? I don't think that's what we want to be doing with the people's money here. And so this is not an amendment we should support. Members, as global warming continues on Mars today, we need to quit spending money in ways like this that simply don't make sense. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Drazkowski, I'm encouraged that you are wondering. I'm encouraged, Representative Newberger, that you researched this because that shows curiosity. It sure shows inquisitiveness. If you look at the amendment, the first word is analyzing, trying to find answers to that wonder, trying to find data. Now, you've drawn conclusions. You had to research, Representative Newberger, you researched it, and you drew conclusions based on what you found. That would be the scientific method. Wonder. Now, a conclusion could be, I'm not going to think about wondering anymore. I'm not going to be curious anymore. What we have in front of us with this amendment and previous amendments and other amendments is research. It's science. It's wonder. So why can't we ask the questions? Are we afraid of the answers? So we're not going to fund the questions? We're not going to fund the research? That's what I'm hearing. We don't want to fund this government grant paid for by the people of Minnesota, analyzing climate data to aid local planning and implementation efforts. Research, science. It's a worthwhile investment, just like the solar research was. Looking for answers. Sometimes we get answers we don't agree with, but that's the wonder of research. I'd encourage a yes vote for the Bly amendment.
The member from Pope, Representative Anderson P.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Speaker and members. Yeah, you know, I'm a farmer, and of course weather is important to a farmer. And the one thing I find interesting about this amendment, Representative Bly talked about we need to do this to analyze long-term trends in weather and climate. Yet this is one-time funding for 1 year that has to be spent by the year 2020. I don't think we can study long-term weather trends because of this amendment.
The member from Crow Wing, Representative Heintzeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just quickly, a couple of things. Representative Hansen mentioned that we're not going to fund warming research. And to those folks watching at home, just to be clear, assessing the release of mercury and sulfur on aquatic communities, $300,000 in the first year from the trust fund of the Boards of Regents to the University of Minnesota to determine the effects of increased temperatures. So we are doing the very best we can to try to fund two priorities here, those that were recommended by the LCCMR board and CREP. And in this particular study, in this particular case, CREP is a higher priority. Members, please vote no to the amendment.
There being no further discussion, a roll call being requested, the clerk will take the roll on the A3 amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 59 ayes and 75 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Sundin moves to amend Senate File Number 550, the third engrossment, as amended, and the amendment is coded A4.
I call upon the member from Pine, Representative Sundin, to report his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Oh, what's going on? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to request a roll call in the A4.
Roll call being requested, and seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Mr. Speaker and members, as we know, the goal of this bill is to address critical environmental concerns that are shared by all of us. Air pollution, water pollution, uncontrolled population growth, and climate change. These are the issues that are going to define our generation. My amendment would use $300,000 of the lottery funds to assist youth programs that are engaging our young people to conserve our environment and combat the damaging effects of climate change. This amendment would empower the DNR Commissioner to work with Climate Generation, founded by famous Arctic explorer Will Steger, to conduct forums, workshops, and trainings to help engage young people in their effort to address our climate impacts on the planet and find ways to reduce that harm for future generations. This appropriation has a clear end date and is not ongoing. It's abundantly clear, and scientists do agree. I'd like to thank Representative Gruenhagen for confirming that 90% of the scientists that do care responded and agree that climate change is one of the most critical challenges facing the survival of our species. As a parent and a grandparent, I also care. I think one of the most fundamental long-term ways we can work to address this problem is by engaging our young people and empowering them to find solutions. If you need convincing, just ask Will Steger about the rapidly increasing rate by which polar ice caps are melting, glaciers are disappearing, and weather is becoming more extreme in our lifetimes. These extreme changes in our climate underlie every challenge we face as a nation and a global community. Climate extremes are causing mass displacement of human beings, destabilizing democratic governments around the world, crippling economies around the world through infrastructure repair costs, and it's accelerating the decline and extinction of animal and plant species throughout the globe, including here in Minnesota, from moose to the monarchs. This amendment is also supported by another legislative body that need not be mentioned. Mr. Speaker, we need to meet this challenge together, and I feel that the mission of this bill, with its shared commitment to the environment, fits perfectly with the climate changes we face. This is one small drop in the bucket, and one small way we can engage our young people to meet this challenge. I ask for a green yes vote.
Discussion to the A4 amendment. Representative Heintzeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Similar topic, and I would again appreciate a no vote.
Seeing no further discussion, a roll call being requested, the clerk will take the roll on the A4 amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 59 ayes and 75 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. Clerk will report the amendment.
Hansen moves to amend Senate File Number 550, the third engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A5.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen, to report his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd ask for a roll call on the A5 amendment.
Roll call being requested, and seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The amendment is pretty short. I want you to go to the bill and look on page 29. This amendment would delete the no net gain provision, the policy that was added in here to the recommendations for the Legislative Commission on Minnesota Resources. Now, this is policy that has been added to a number of pieces of legislation moving through the Minnesota legislature this year. I've also handed out a map so that you can see the counties located in whole or in part north of US Highway 2. Now, at first blush, if I was being parochial, it might be good to have this provision, because if land isn't being acquired north of Highway 2, it would be acquired somewhere else, perhaps in my district or somebody else's district, if I was being parochial. But we are sent here as state representatives, and when you look at the map, it actually divides the state, literally dividing the state, dividing us, and saying we will have a different set of requirements here. If there was a unique piece of property that could be acquired in that area north of Highway 2, it would have a different set of rules. So although this might be tempting for each of us looking at our districts, it sets the precedent for continued division. Continued division is not what I think we were sent here to do. Voting for the A5 amendment will remove this divisive piece, literally dividing the state, and have the recommendations go forward.
Discussion to the A5 amendment. Representative Heintzeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wanted to point out again that this provision is specifically related to property or counties north of Highway 2. And there's more support for this than folks might think, and I'd appreciate a green vote.
The member from Mahnomen, Representative Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this may sound strange, but I'm going to thank Representative Hansen for bringing this forward, because it gives me one more opportunity to set some facts out. And I will tell you that every time this subject comes up, I gain support. I have sent out some letters from counties that have already filed no net gain. I have other counties that have them coming, but they had to wait for their county boards to meet. If you look at the amount of land that has been purchased and lost in Minnesota to public ownership and now is no longer taxable, Minnesota itself has 17% of that land. The federal government has 8%. If you add in our lakes that are all public waters and can't be taxed, that's another 4%. Puts us at 29%, and that does not include nonprofits. And so if you add in the nonprofits, I'm pretty sure we'd be getting really close to 1/3 of the state that's no longer taxable. And what does that mean for us? In counties like Mahnomen County, which is a very poor county and is 25% non-taxable. Clearwater County, almost 37% non-taxable. Beltrami County, over 70% non-taxable, close to 80%. And it gets worse up in the Iron Range, and you'll see 2 resolutions from both Lake and St. Louis counties. And what does this mean for us? You know, when we lose this property and it comes off the tax rolls, everybody else's taxes go up to make up the difference. And so we're seeing a huge increase now in properties that are being lost to tax forfeit, because people on fixed incomes can no longer afford to pay the rising property taxes. This last year, Mahnomen County had 19 notices sent out for additional tax forfeits. Clearwater County, 37. Becker County, 67. It's a huge problem for us, huge problem. And this amendment does not mandate anything. It simply says if county boards, at the approval of the people in their counties, say we just can't take any more, then they can file a no net gain. If at that time the DNR or other agencies feel that there's a very important piece of land that needs to be preserved, and they can sell other property to make up the difference. And that would work well for us too, because some of these properties that they may want to purchase are huge tracts. And they have many tracts that are 40, 80, 160 acres that small families or beginning families, people would love to have, could they afford it. The other thing that is happening with the increased loss of property in our district is it's driving up our values, the property values, because the less land you have, the more valuable it is. And there again, it takes it out of reach of young people who want to come and start families. So if Representative Hansen would feel more comfortable if this was statewide, I'm all for that too. So we can go that route as well. But this is important to us, and it's going to keep coming back till it passes. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Heintzeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I meant to say vote with Representative Green. So if there's any confusion, members, and I'm sorry, Representative Hansen, what I was trying to say was that there's more support for this provision that would allow counties to enact a no net gain policy than you would think. Members, unfortunately, please vote red on the amendment.
Seeing no further discussion and a roll call being requested, the clerk will take the roll on the A5 amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 56 ayes and 77 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Becker-Finn moves to amend Senate File Number 550, the third engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A6.
Call upon the member from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And there is an amendment to the amendment. I'd like to move that.
The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Becker-Finn is moving to amend her amendment to Senate File Number 550, the third engrossment as amended, and the amendment to the amendment is coded A7.
Representative Becker-Finn, to your amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The A7 amendment to the amendment is adding back a project that was included in the original commission recommendations. This project would provide for workshops and outreach to protect bald eagles and other birds from lead poisoning. And this is not the first time we have talked about lead ammunition and lead poisoning this year, but I did want to kind of rewind a little bit and explain why this issue is important.
So here's the deal for those who don't hunt. You're out deer hunting. You're using the usual bullets you've used for years, you've been buying and hunting with for years. They contain lead. Lead is poison. When you shoot a deer, that lead bullet hits the deer and fragments into a lot of tiny pieces, up to 498 fragments from one bullet. And most of those fragments are smaller than you're able to see normally, but you can see them on an X-ray. And I do have something, an article that they're passing out, that the top left shows a picture of an X-ray where you can see the little flecks of all those fragments of what a lead bullet looks like when you take an X-ray of something. It's a deer that's been shot with a lead bullet. And those fragments can travel up to 14 inches to each side of the bullet channel in a deer or other animal that you're shooting. And those fragments, though very small, are still lead and still poison. So the next, and warning to the vegetarians and vegans out here, but the reality for my non-hunting friends is that after you shoot a deer, you gut it. So you leave that gut pile out in the woods or field, and animals come eat it. That's nature. But if you shot that deer with a lead bullet, you are also leaving those tiny poisonous lead fragments in that gut pile for those animals to eat. And now you're poisoning the birds and the animals and the animals that would come to that gut pile. And one of the birds most harmed by ingesting these lead fragments is the bald eagle, our national symbol of freedom and a spiritual symbol for many of us. What this project would do, it's a great project. It's being done by the Raptor Center at the University of Minnesota. They work together with the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association, Conservation Federation, several other groups, including the DNR, Pollution Control Agency. And so what this would do is provide some funding so they can do a project to do outreach to, they're hoping at least 1,200 hunters, providing education and alternatives to lead ammunition. Because there are non-lead options, many of them produced right here in Minnesota. So if you care about addressing this issue of lead in our environment and limiting that amount of lead that is ingested by our wildlife, including the bald eagle, you should vote green for this amendment. Thanks.
Discussion to the amendment to the amendment. Representative Becker-Finn.
Sorry, roll call, please.
A roll call being requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Further discussion to the amendment to the amendment. Seeing none, a roll call being requested. Clerk will take the roll on the amendment to the amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 59 ayes and 74 nays, the amendment to the amendment is not adopted. Members, we are back on the A7 amendment. Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr.
Excuse
Speaker.
me, the A6.
Mr. Speaker, I would withdraw the A6 amendment.
Representative Becker-Finn withdraws the A6 amendment. There is another amendment at the desk. Clerk will report the amendment.
Wagenius moves to amend Senate File Number 550, the third engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A8.
I recognize the author of the amendment from Hennepin, Representative Wagenius, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we've been talking about science projects, and this amendment restores 5 of the science projects that were deleted in the House Environment Committee. These were part of the recommendations made by the LCCMR as part of their balance, and you will see that these come from different parts of the state. So I'll just tell you very briefly about each one of them. The University of Minnesota at Crookston would use Minnesota freshwater sponges to, among other things, teach students about how to do science research and help us understand Minnesota sponges. I'm guessing most of us didn't even know that sponges actually grew in Minnesota freshwater. A second one is the Minnesota Zoo would restore native mussels to 3 rivers, the Cannon, the Cedar, and the Mississippi. Mussels are a key indicator of the health of a river, and they are a benefit to the river because they will clean it up. There are 2 University of Minnesota Morris projects that folks have discussed before. One is helping dairy farmers with solar and whether it be of use to them on their dairy farm. And the second is the robots for weed control. What wasn't mentioned in the original or in the earlier discussion we had is the intention is that these robots would be manufactured in Minnesota, and I expect a lot of you know that we do have a very robust robot manufacturing in Minnesota. There's another science project. This one is very small, very inexpensive, and it's the Headwaters Science Center in Bemidji. I told you I was going to go all over the place in the state. This is just to accelerate science for middle school students focused on water quality, watershed evaluation, and aquatics invasive research in northwestern Minnesota. The 5th is a little bit different. There's a scientific and natural area project that was recommended for funding at $4.5 million. Of that, 2/3 of it is for restoration work, but 1/3 is for feed title acquisition. And it would acquire for the state about 250 acres of scientific and natural area. And that would come up to be about $6,000 an acre. Keep that in mind. What's particularly good about this proposal is we would both preserve rare and endangered species in Minnesota, and it's very likely that this particular land would be available for hunting. So scientific and natural areas are part of our outdoor recreation system, and 89% of them do have some form of hunting. I told you to keep the number of 6,000 per acre in mind, because if you look at the proposal for CREP, which I like CREP, and I have worked for CREP funding, but at $500 million for 60,000 acres, that means each CREP acre on average would cost $8,333. So for bang for the buck, acquiring scientific and natural areas would be less expensive. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask for a roll call.
Roll call being requested and seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion to the A8 amendment. Representative Heintzeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Wagenius, I don't dislike any of those projects. It's just simply a situation where CREP is a higher priority. Members, please vote no.
Further discussion. Seeing none, a roll call being requested. Clerk will take the roll on the A8 amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 72 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Wagenius moves to amend Senate File Number 550, the third engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A9.
I call upon the member from Hennepin to report her amendment. Representative Wagenius.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I have been fortunate to be a member of LCCMR for the past 2 years and was part of the committee that pulled together this compromise package, and it was a compromise, and it did balance projects across the state. What this amendment does is put back the projects that were taken out. And I'm going to just go over the projects that were taken out in big picture. I'm not certainly going to go over every one of them, but there are a couple of themes that I want you to know. Keeping in mind that we're substituting in here funding for CREP at $8,333 an acre. There are 4 projects that were taken out, all having to do with land acquisition, either in fee or an easement. And in each case, the land acquisition is less, costs less. So there's more actual bang for the buck in the LCCMR projects. So let me just give you, I talked a little bit about just before the scientific and natural areas that are not only preserving rare and endangered species, but they're also likely to be huntable, and they are at $6,000 an acre. There's another project that would require an interest in land, and this is easements, and it's not a fee. And for $1.6 million, it would acquire 335 acres with a cost per acre of an average of $4,931. I'm sure that you all know that only 1% of native prairie remains, and there's real question about whether native prairie will maintain over the long haul. So preserving what we have left is critical. There are, in this particular prairie bank easement project, there's also a lot of money for restoration, and that comes in at $3,500 an acre. Another of the recommended land projects this would be DNR, would acquire 373 acres within the boundaries of state parks, and that is coming in at about $4,000 an acre. And the last one is for the metropolitan area. I told you there was balance in the original proposals, and that is for the acquisition of 197 acres within the boundaries of metropolitan parks, and that is for $7,000 an acre on average. Those are the land projects. One of the projects that that I was going to talk about, but Representative Bly talked a lot about, were the projects that work well for farmers. There are the couple at the U of M in Morris, and there is the one that actually takes satellite data and brings it down to a 3x3 square mile, so folks will know about the potential for extreme rainfall, the potential for flooding, and the potential for how aquifers are actually refilled. And over the long haul, farmers really need those aquifers to be refilled. And a couple of more things just to tell you about more bang for the buck. Some of the recommended projects provide education opportunities for students, and others provide volunteer opportunities. Altogether, the deleted provisions would deny over 332,000 students an additional opportunity for education, and 270,000 Minnesotans would not have the opportunities to benefit from environmental outreach. That's the big picture total. I'll give you one of the examples that is within this total, and that is 530 Great River Greening volunteers who would restore 250 acres in the metro area. And that's, of course, one of the proposals that was deleted. There are just a couple more. Well, we talked about the University of Minnesota at Duluth and the wild rice, very unique project. The freshwater sponges, again, a very unique project. And the Minnesota Zoo, another unique project, all deleted here. So with that, members, I think the bang for the buck is restoring the projects that the LCCMR originally recommended. And I would ask for a green vote and a roll call. Go ahead.
A roll call being requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Further discussion. The member from Brown, Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I served on LCCMR when these recommendations were assembled and voted on. And I'd like to make a couple of points. One, we've heard a lot about the possible use of bonding dollars for the CREP program. That's fine. There will probably be some bonding dollars. There are some in the bill. But there's no way that even at the $30 million that's been recommended, that there will be adequate funds there to meet the need for CREP. This is a large program. Total of funding from the state to leverage the federal money would be $150 million. So even if we did 30 in the bonding bill, we would not have nearly enough to meet the federal match. There's also been quite a bit of talk about relative expense of purchasing land. The state's contribution to these purchases under CREP is only 30%. So even at the $8,333 figure, the state would only be spending $2,500 to get those acres into a permanent easement program. The CREP program came up rather suddenly, wasn't on the table when these recommendations were made. It's a high priority of the governor and does have the impact of protecting critical lands potentially all across the state with a voluntary program. Finally, I would just like to make sure folks understand that we take a vote as an LCCMR committee, and the vote on these particular recommendations very nearly failed. We had, if one more person would have voted no, these recommendations would not be before us today. And in fact, when Senator Tory Westrom voted he wanted it put in the record that he was reluctantly supporting the recommendations and hoped there would be some improvements by LCCMR. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members.
Further discussion to the A9 amendment. Representative Heintzeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, please vote red on the amendment.
Seeing no further discussion, a roll call being requested, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 58 ayes and 75 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There are no more amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill as amended its third reading.
Senate File Number 550, third reading, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill as amended. Representative Wagenius.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a few words on this. What Representative Torkelson failed to mention about the consensus process that went on through LCCMR as we added things into the package, there generally was consensus, and it does take a supermajority to put a package out. But the real thing is not LCCMR members. It is two things. The LCCMR package, as originally provided, was balanced across the state, and it provides a lot more bang for the buck. And on for those two reasons, I would ask you to vote no on this bill and hope we can do a lot better in conference committee than this particular proposal.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I just want to say thank you to Representative Heintzeman for the fine work that he and his team have done putting this bill together. And I ask everyone to vote green. Thank you.
Further discussion. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Sometimes the most dangerous question is why? And searching for answers involves a scientific method. Here we go again with the Legislative Commission on Minnesota Resources, where science projects are deleted in favor of another project. Now, we may agree that the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program is a good project, and I think if you look at the discussion and the debate we've had throughout this session, there's a variety of pots of money. Different councils, different commissions, different groups, different opportunities. Every member has voted one way or another on which pot of money they think money should come from for CREP. Some think it should come from bonding, some from outdoor heritage, some from clean water, legacy. some from LCCMR. Why is this source of funds not appropriate? Traditionally, the lottery dollars have been used for more science. Now, there have been some acquisitions that have occurred, but it is always the lottery funds that seem to get tinkered with the most. And they seem to get tinkered with on both sides. But the science projects relating to solar, to climate, to lead always come out of the package when the Republicans are in charge. Solar, climate, and lead. Solar, climate, and lead always get removed. And so, how do we fix this? Do we just keep repeating this year after year, where we have our own affinities of where we think money should come from? When the voters have authorized the creation of these funds for certain purposes. I think it's been creative this year to see the interlocking sources of dollars and interlocking sources of agencies and funds. I will give you credit for that. But because it's creative, does that make it right? I think, members, a no vote on this gives an opportunity for a reset. I agree with you, Representative Torkelson, that I don't think there's going to be a lot of matching money there for the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program after October 1st. But the bonding bill that was brought up yesterday only had $10 million in it, not the $30 million. So hopefully we can achieve some compromise and allow the research that came from the process, the research into solar, the research into lead, the research into climate, the analysis, the questions to be asked so that we can get some answers and that we can provide a path for a variety of good things for Minnesota. I'd ask for a no vote on this bill to start over.
Further discussion? The member from Crow Wing, Representative Heintzeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, 5 years ago, I was digging rain gardens for a local lake association and a manager on a watershed district. It's been quite a process to now come to a day like today and have the opportunity to carry a bill that is going to be impacting folks all across the state of Minnesota, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. And when I was originally approached if I should or would be interested in carrying this bill, I, to begin with, was a little concerned about that. I don't often get up and I listen to a lot of the debate, but I'm glad to be able to participate. I'm glad to be able to work on this. And I know that there are differences in the opinions as to what should or shouldn't be in the bill, but I think in the end we're going to see a lot of green on that board. I think there's a lot of things that people are going to be able to support here, and I think that it's good for the state of Minnesota. Members, please support my bill.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Clerk will close the roll. Portman votes No. There being 82 ayes and 52 noes, the bill as amended is passed and its title agreed to. Reports from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Pepin from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bill to be placed on the calendar for the day for Saturday, May 20th, 2017, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bill. House File Number 739.
Conference Committee reports on House files.
Conference Committee report, this is the Smith motion. Conference Committee report on House File Number 1542, an act relating to human rights. The report is addressed to the Honorable Kurt L. Doudt, Speaker of the House, and the Honorable Michelle L. Fischbach, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees for House File Number 1542, report that we have agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by all three conferees on the part of the House and all three conferees on the part of the Senate. Smith moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File Number 1542 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
I recognize the author, Representative Smith, who will explain the report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House File 1542 Conference Committee Report for the American Disabilities Act bill. I want to thank my fellow conferees, including Representative Fisher and Swedzinski. This bill initially had 110 votes when it came off the House floor. We kept working on this bill, meeting with all of the stakeholders, including several meetings with Commissioner Lindsay. We worked on the weather issue, we worked on the pro se component, we worked on the personal injury component, all concerns heard on this floor for this bill that day. The result of which resulted in everyone on the Conference Committee report signing the bill, gaining the support of the Commissioner of Human Rights. Also gaining the support of the Legal Aid, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, and the State Council of Disabilities. This bill will increase accessibility for people that are disabled, and it will decrease lawsuits that are frivolous. I ask for your support.
Discussion to the committee report. Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to thank Representative Smith for the great work that he did in helping bring the parties together on making this bill much better than when we had originally started. I know that there were a lot of concerns. First on is number one on the weather provision. And I'd like to acknowledge the work that was done in that area, letting people know that if the business does have a weather concern, that before they can have an extension, they have to be very specific about what is going to happen. The business has to lay out exactly what they're going to do and when they're going to have the work done by. Something that's a very reasonable way to approach it when weather has interfered in what they need to do to correct the situation. Number two, a big issue last time around is what happens when you have a person who's acting as a pro se. And I think this bill did a great job of addressing that. It lets people know that if they want to go ahead and do the lawsuit on their own, they're able to do that. At the same time, if at a certain point they want to go ahead and get an attorney, they can still go ahead and get an attorney and have that attorney represent them, as long as if it's happening within the 60-day period, the 60-day notice is abided by. But if the person doesn't get an attorney till after the first 60 days, they don't have to file notice. A very reasonable compromise that was reached, something is supported by all. So I would encourage everyone to support this with a green vote.
Further discussion on the Conference Committee report. There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on House File 1542 say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
House File Number 1542, as amended, third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading. Further discussion. There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 112 ayes and 22 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference. If there are no objection, we will revert to messages from the Senate. The member from Blue Earth.
Message from the Senate. This is the Swedzinski motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments the concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File Number 1242, an act relating to local government. The message is signed Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate. Swedzinski moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 1242 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
I recognize the member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, appreciate the opportunity to come back with this. So House File 1242 came back from the Senate, as we discussed, off the House floor. There was a couple concerns in a particular two areas that we worked to address in an amendment, two amendments that were different substantial changes to the bill to help address some of the issues that the cities came forward with. One of them was for the exempt interim ordinances to deal with the concerns so they would be able to continue to act quickly in emergency situations. This bill would have no impact on their ability to do that by exempting interim ordinances. And this is the area that I said I'd work on. And the second is changing the language when it comes to first discussed. And that was a potential area where there was a little bit of gray area in exactly what that meant into law. And so we changed that into 10 days prior to final action to help clarify that for that. And then the third was a pretty minor change that focused on just simply removing two businesses. When this bill really started out at its infancy, we were really focusing on the ordinance changes when it came to business and just the trouble with that and separating the two between just public notice and business notice. And we just, this bill changed over time and really kind of drew away from directly focusing towards business. So on the floor, Senator Latz asked for an oral amendment to remove that portion to get it better stating to what the bill actually did. So those are the the parts that we worked on it and to come to better agreement, to come further along to where some of the groups that are interested and concerned about the bill. And I'd appreciate your green vote once again. Thank you.
Discussion to the motion. Representative Considine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege. The pages have been passing out a photograph. I would like to introduce you to Jim Hemshot, one of 3 staff members at the security hospital that went to the hospital last night after an altercation at the security hospital. we did not provide 1 penny to increase the staffing at the security hospital. And in fact, it would appear with Representative Anderson's bill, they will be cutting staff. The gentleman you see in the picture was on overtime. 3 of them went to the hospital. It has been well documented. We need to increase the staffing ratios. This is the result of not having those staffing ratios increased. Earlier today, we recognized the brave men in the State Patrol and police officers. Make no mistake about it, the people that work at the security hospital are also invested in your safety and the public's safety, and it is disgraceful that we have done nothing to help them increase the staffing ratios in St. Peter. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to concur? Further discussion? There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to concur with the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its 3rd reading as amended by Senate.
3rd reading, House File Number 1242, as amended by the Senate.
3rd reading. Further discussion? There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Clerk will close the roll. Joachim votes aye. There being 90 ayes and 43 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by Senate and its title agreed to.
Message from the Senate, and this is the Fabian motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments the concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File Number 985, an act relating to civil actions. The message is signed Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate. Fabian moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 985 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
I recognize the author, Representative Fabian, who will explain the Senate amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is my motion. This would be returning the bill to the language that it was when it came to the House floor. Thank you.
Discussion to the Senate amendments. There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to concur with the Senate amendments say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its 3rd reading as amended by Senate.
House File Number 985, as 3rd reading as amended by the Senate.
3rd reading. Further discussion. Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members. I just want to remind people that this is the trespass liability bill that protects private property owners. It has strong support from a wide group of people outside of here, the Minnesota Farmers Union, the Timber Industries, Farm Bureau, Minnesota Resort and Campground Association, Minnesota Retailers Association, Minnesota Agri-Growth Council, and NFIB Minnesota. And I encourage a green vote. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. Clerk will close the roll. There being 88 ayes and 46 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by the Senate and its title agreed to.
Message from the Senate, and this is the Anderson S. motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which the amendments, the concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House file number 399, an act relating to public employment. The message is signed Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate. Anderson S. moves that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 399, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 5 members of the House, and that the House request that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Anderson S.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is my motion. That's dealing with House File 399. That's a bill dealing with the severance, and I'd ask for a conference committee to be appointed.
Member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, there's no reason to vote against this, but I would say that this again marks a moment in time when we are going down the path of more conflict and confrontation instead of negotiations. The governor put a very serious offer on the table yesterday. The Republicans did not return with any kind of a serious offer. It took them 3 hours to move $50 million on their tax target. And so we are setting up conference committees to send more bills for more vetoes when all this time that we're spending doing this could be better spent in negotiations.
All those in favor of the Anderson S. motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. Motion prevails.
Message from the Senate. This is the Cornish motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments to concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House file number 470, an act relating to public safety. The message is signed Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate. Cornish moves that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 470, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 5 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
Call upon the member from Blue Earth, Representative Cornish, to your amendment.
Mr. Speaker and members, that's my motion. The Senate has never seen a bill they didn't want to change, and they changed it for the worse, so I would like to go into conference.
Discussion to the Cornish motion. The member from LeSueur, Representative Johnson C.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Representative Cornish yield to 2 questions?
He will yield, Representative Johnson.
My first question, Representative Cornish, is would you just explain a little bit what that bill is? And my second question is, would you tell us where that wonderful pie came from this morning?
Representative Cornish.
Mr. Speaker and members, Representative Johnson, the bill is tampering with a motor vehicle by police, or not by police, a police motor vehicle, I should say. That would be a good one. And they changed the language about knowing if it is a police vehicle or a public safety vehicle away from our language, and it screws it up. So I'd like to go into conference. Where the pies came from is the Dam store, and it's called the Dam Pie. And I did send some damn pie over to the governor today, too, so hopefully he enjoys that. But anyway, it's a Rapidan Dan south of Mankato and the dam store. Thank you.
Further discussion to the Cornish motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails.
Message from the Senate. This is the Drazkowski motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments to concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File Number 1725, an act relating to motor vehicles. The message is signed Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate. Drazkowski moves that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 1725, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 3 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
Call upon the member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is the milk truck bill. That is my motion, and the conference committee process will be very quick. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Discussion to the Drazkowski motion. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails.
Message from the Senate. This is the Davids motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments to concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File Number 1226, an act relating to taxation. The bill is signed Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate. Davids moves that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 1226, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 5 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
Recognize the member from Fillmore, Representative Davids, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is the Department of Revenue policy bill. A few differences with the Senate. We need to take it to conference. Thank you.
Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor of the Davids motion, please signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. Announcements by the Speaker.
Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File Number 399. Anderson S., O'Driscoll, Fenton, Nash, and Detmer. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File Number 470. Cornish, Johnson B., Zerwas, Scott, and Hillstrom. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File Number 1725. Drazkowski, Miller, and Pulowski. Announcements by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File Number 1226. Davids, McDonald, Hertos, Drazkowski, and Marquardt. Announcements by the Speaker. A message from the Senate has been received requesting concurrence by the House to amendments adopted by the Senate to the following House file, House File Number 959.
Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controverted motions on the House desk and online. If there are no objections, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objections, the motions prevail. Member from Carver, Representative Hoppe.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to move that we take Senate File 444 up off of the table. It was the bill, the Omnibus liquor bill that I tabled on Monday.
Hoppe moves that Senate File 444 be taken from the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. Motions prevail. Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to reconsider the A13 amendment.
Torkelson moves that the vote whereby the Hillstrom A13 amendment to Senate File 444 the unofficial engrossment as amended was adopted be now reconsidered. Discussion. Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, I would ask that you vote not to reconsider this amendment, and I would ask for a roll call vote, Mr. Speaker.
Roll call being requested and seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House Research did a short subject on the three-tier liquor system in Minnesota, March of 2015. And there have not been significant changes since that was done. And so I want to make certain that you know and understand why we have the three-tier system for liquor here in Minnesota. Liquor is controlled for a number of reasons. One is to deny access to minors, to limit overconsumption, to ensure public safety via a clean supply, and allow communities control over the type and nature of the liquor venues. Liquor is also regulated as an industry, both to compel the industry to meet public goals of the state and to ensure fair competition. So we have a three-tier system in Minnesota. It's the classic model for liquor regulation, and it creates a three-tier system for supply and distribution. This structure was created after Prohibition in order to modulate the pro-consumption system in place before Prohibition. One aspect of that pre-Prohibition system was the existence of tied houses. Retailers owned by the manufacturers and serving as aggressive sales outlets for those manufacturers. So Minnesota has a much modified version of this three-tiered system. And in a pure three-tier system, manufacturers make the spirits, the beer, and the wine. Wholesalers distribute those across and within the state to retailers, and then retailers sell those to consuming public. But there are other models for regulating the sales of alcoholic beverages. Some states are control states. Minnesota didn't want to go there, where wholesalers, 18 states, and retailers, 14 states, are operated in whole or in part by the state. The other 32, including Minnesota, are licensed states. We allow sales, for the most part, through independent licensed businesses. In Minnesota, municipal liquor stores do exist at the discretion of the local municipality, but otherwise government doesn't own the system. We license them. But we have exceptions to the three-tier system in Minnesota. We're not pure. The state has granted numerous exceptions, which has created and modified this three-tier structure. Some exceptions that apply to manufacturers, breweries, brew on-premises stores. These stores allow consumers to be manufacturers of beer or wine for private use. We also have some exceptions for wholesalers. Non-primary source state Minnesota is the only non-primary source state, which means that the wholesaler does not have to purchase all products directly from the manufacturer, but can instead buy the manufacturer's products from third parties, essentially other wholesalers on the global market. Some other exceptions that apply to retailers, municipal and non-municipals. Minnesota allows municipal liquor stores to operate as a monopoly, and also to allow local governments to license multiple private stores, creating two different retail systems. Bed and breakfast establishments can sell up to 2 glasses of wine with a stay at their establishment without a license. 3.2% malt liquor has a separate sales provision, including allowing sales at grocery stores and convenience stores. Culinary classes are allowed to serve limited amounts of alcohol. There are some other exceptions that apply to more than one tier. Brew pubs, farm wineries, small brewers. Small brewers can now sell growlers at their tap rooms. Tap rooms and cocktail rooms, brewers can now sell their beers in tap rooms, and small distillers can sell their liquor in cocktail rooms. Wine over the internet, Minnesota allows the purchase and direct shipment of 2 cases of wine from a winery over the internet, and also allows Minnesota wineries to sell 2 cases to a given consumer by allowing these manufacturers to act as direct retailers. The creation of the 3-tier system over 75 years ago acted as a regulatory channel, directing investments into business that thrived within the regulatory tiers was created. The weakening of the 3-tier system has allowed new businesses to come into being, and the modification of regulatory scheme can create business channels that in some instances weaken other business investments. Arguments to modify the 3-tier system are as old as the system itself. Usually we see modifications that come as part of negotiations that people participate in, both sides. And we saw, and you have handouts that are coming around, a nice thick packet. First are the newspaper articles from March of 2013 when the last agreement was made. On page 3 of that, the Minnesota Brewers Association worked closely with the Minnesota Licensed Beverage Association to find compromise in raising the growler production limit, and Minneapolis brewery employees seem generally optimistic. That's the first quote. The second article, and I quote, "Our goal is to amend the law and raise the annual production cut-off threshold. We are not seeking to expand the time or place we can sell growlers or the amount of them that we can sell." Again, 2013. 2013 again, an article. The Minnesota Brewers Association, different from the Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild. The quote is, "This group isn't trying to change the limit on growler sales. 500 barrels a year seems to be enough." Members, I then included my comments when this amendment was adopted. And I made it very clear about how much alcohol are we talking about here. The change to 40,000 barrels equals 550,400 cases of beer. Again, that is the entire consumer base of the Bemidji market, 90% of the consumer base in the Brainerd market, and 70% of the total consumer base in the Duluth market. Members, I believe that this amendment should not be reconsidered. I believe that this body voted to take these provisions out because they were not part of the compromise. I believe that folks should be working together on these issues, and they should not be partisan. Now, one might say, well, one side only wants to benefit the other side. Minnesota has an interest in having a 3-tier system and regulated. Now, if you want to go to a different regulation model, that's completely a different conversation to have. But I also included a new piece of information that I just received today. A letter went out on May 12th of 2017 for a new group, the Minnesota Marketplace Alcohol Alliance. You can see the new sign-up sheet and the goals and the mission. Members, this amendment is just step 1, based on this information right here, in the deregulation of alcohol in Minnesota. Now, if that's the direction you want to go, that's not the direction I want to go, and I would ask members to vote no, and I'd ask, again, I asked for that roll call.
Roll call being requested, and seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Member from Hennepin, Representative Dean R.
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
I believe that when a member asks for something to be reconsidered, are they needed to vote in favor of that consideration, or in the winning side of that consideration?
Representative Dim, yes, they must vote on the
Okay, then
side
I
of the
would like
prevail.
to ask Representative Torkelson if he'd yield to a question.
Representative Torkelson is not on the floor.
I can
Representative
wait.
Dean.
Mr. Speaker,
Representative Kresha.
point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
I just want to make sure I heard that right. You have to vote with the prevailing side, not necessarily in favor of it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Representative Kresha, you must vote for the prevailing side.
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Is it acceptable to ask someone how they voted on a bill?
Representative Kresha, there was not a recorded vote, and so based upon that, we must honor the intention for those that stood or did not stand on that vote. Member from Brown, Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. In spite of not being required to, I'm happy to acknowledge that I did vote on the prevailing side.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion to the motion to reconsider. Member from Dakota, Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I have to rise in support of Representative Hillstrom's plea to not support the motion to reconsider. She's absolutely right. We have been taking steps year after year after year since I've been here, and I haven't been here very long, to change the way we regulate liquor in Minnesota, and for good reason. There's some really impressive and exciting, innovative businesses that are springing up around the state. However, if we are going to change the way that we regulate liquor in Minnesota, we have to do it in a global way. We have to look at the entire industry and not choose winners and losers in this situation. We have to work to protect our Main Street retailers. These guys are small business owners as our communities as well. And we can't come to the table with a proposal that puts their businesses at risk in order to benefit other businesses. The fact is these businesses in Minnesota can thrive, and they have thrived, and congratulations. Happy to have contributed to some of their success, frankly. But here's the point. We can't keep pushing and pushing and pushing the boundaries without bringing the parties together in a responsible way to talk about how everyone's business is going to be impacted by the changes that are being proposed. That hasn't happened, unfortunately, with this bill, and so the motion to reconsider is ill-advised. The body got it right. And so I urge members to vote to not reconsider.
The member from Carver, Representative Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker and members, I would encourage members to support Representative Torkelson's motion. We have made, since I've been here, and we will continue to make changes in our state's liquor laws. And again, it's not because any of us want it, even though some of us might. It's because the citizens of Minnesota, their tastes are changing, times are changing. What our citizens, what our constituents want keeps changing. Having said that, what I would like to do, and Representative Hillstrom is my friend and I enjoy working with her, but I would like to have her amendment off, take this bill to conference. The bill that will come back is not going to be substantively different than current law. We're going to make a little bit of change. What I'd really like to do is get this to a point where we can all agree for the health of the brewing industry, and so that we don't have to have this argument all the time, get a final number. This is what it is. In the eyes of the state of Minnesota, when you get to, right now the number is 40,000. Senator Dames is at 20,000. What I'd like to do is find some place where we can stop and we agree that we are going to have a liquor bill in succeeding years, but I would like to not have the discussion about how many barrels makes you a small beer brewer in the state of Minnesota. Please let me take this bill to conference. Let's see if we can get that to work out. Please support the Torkelson motion. Thank you, members.
Further discussion? Seeing none, a roll call being requested, the clerk will take the roll on the motion to reconsider the Hillstrom A13 amendment. Clerk will close the roll. Ward votes no. There being 77 ayes and 54 noes, the motion to reconsider the A13 Hillstrom amendment prevails. Clerk will report the Hillstrom amendment.
Hillstrom moves to amend Senate File Number 444. The unofficial engrossment as follows, and the amendment is coded A13.
I call upon the member from Hennepin, Representative Hillstrom, to introduce her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my amendment simply deletes Section 3, 4, 5, and 6 from the bills. Members, we debated this bill. The majority of members of this body voted in favor of this amendment. Members, you have in writing the copy of the speech that I gave on the floor about why to do that, and so I won't go through that. Members, you are making a choice today. You're not voting on some supposed proposal that Representative Hoppe might bring back from conference. You are choosing today whether you are voting in favor of these limits or not. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a roll call vote.
Roll call being requested, and seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Further discussion. Member from Carver, Representative Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And like Representative Hillstrom, I think we went over this the other day. I won't belabor this. And with all respect, because I consider Representative Hillstrom a valued colleague and a friend, but I would encourage members to cast a red vote on the Hillstrom amendment. Thank you.
Discussion to the A13 amendment. Member from Hennepin, Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I really hope you will not support the A13 amendment. We've had a few changes to our liquor laws, long overdue over the past few years, and every step of the way, the MLBA and others have tried to block it, even though they may not admit it now. I authored the taproom bill in 2011 to allow small craft brewers to start up and try to build a base of support by serving glasses of their own beer in a taproom at their brewery in 2011. And you would have thought the sky was going to fall. And that is the case with every time we try to make a little adjustment. The three-tier system is still intact, still alive and well. But small adjustments in our liquor laws have created a booming industry. We make beer here in Minnesota, lots of it, again. We're one of the top 10 states in the nation. And that has happened with the advent of the taproom bill. This has been good for not only craft beer makers, it's good for farmers, it's been good for the commercial real estate industry in the state of Minnesota. It is good for employees that work in those businesses, for people who make the equipment. Small distillers have started up trying to do the same thing, and it's helped distributors as well. Representative Hoppe has presented some great information that the number of licenses for wholesalers has gone up, the number of licenses for retail off-sale liquor stores has gone up, the number of Teamsters serving those businesses has gone up. This has not decimated the industry. Providing some choice that has helped small businesses grow and thrive in Minnesota has been good for everybody associated with the liquor industry here. So please don't be concerned about the folks who are constantly saying no to change. Change has brought jobs, and it's brought us to a point we were making things again in Minnesota. Please vote no.
Further discussion. Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just to respond, members, I have been in support of many of the changes to the liquor laws that we've had before us. Surly came from my district. Senator Scheid actually has, she's my senator, we worked on a number of these proposals together. Surly actually has a room named after her upon her death. So this isn't about being against change. This is about making certain that those who are impacted by these change actually have a say. and making certain that the changes that we're making are not undoing the regulation that we have put in place to ensure there will not be corruption in the system. There was a time in Minnesota where liquor was run in a different way. You could make it, you could ship it, and you could sell it. That is not a time we would like to go back to here. So members, I would encourage you to support the proposal. Representative Hoppe did not have this proposal in his bill in Commerce when he brought his bill to Commerce. This was offered as an amendment to his bill, and it was adopted on a strictly party line vote in Commerce. And that's not usually the way liquor bills are done in this body.
Representative Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Hillstrom, I apologize. I didn't mean to get up after you, but Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to let people know because we did a little bit of a different procedure here in taking the bill off the table, and I just wanted to make sure that people knew what we're voting for here. And I feel a little bit like on Monday I didn't do a good enough job of explaining to people what we were looking at and why. So with respect, again, I would encourage members to vote no on the Hillstrom amendment.
Member from Hennepin, Representative Anderson S.
Thank you, members, Mr. Speaker, and members. I would encourage you to vote no on the Hillstrom amendment as well, because what you are voting for, if you vote for the Hillstrom amendment, is that you're saying that Minnesota made is not as good as the national, international outfits out there. You are choosing the competitors of the national level over the Minnesota-made products here in this state. And I wish that Representative Rukavina was here today because he was our king of Minnesota-made. I won't tell you what he said all of his articles of clothing were Minnesota-made. I think that was a little too much information that he would offer sometimes on the House floor. But I will tell you that what we're doing here today is we're promoting Minnesota businesses. We're promoting job growth here in the state of Minnesota. And I am never more proud when I can walk into a liquor store and buy a Minnesota-made beer. And this is not going to change the fact that you're going to be walking into these liquor stores and buying those products in those liquor stores. All it says is that business, those that are making their own product, they can sell a very small, minute amount out of their shop, the product that they made. We're talking about 1.8% out of their product that they would be able to sell. So folks, if you support Minnesota businesses over the big conglomerates, if you're for the little guy, you're going to vote no against this amendment.
Further discussion. Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, my provision deletes new language and leaves current law as it is. Leaves current law as it is. It doesn't stop anyone from selling growlers they can currently sell. It doesn't stop anyone from selling any alcohol they currently sell. It just says we're not going to go to these larger amounts.
There being no further discussion, a roll call being requested. The clerk will take the roll on the A13 amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 57 ayes and 74 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There's another amendment at the desk. Clerk will report the amendment.
Loeffler moves to amend Senate File Number 444, the unofficial engrossment, as follows, and the amendment is coded A17-0460.
Representative Loeffler, you have an amendment to your amendment. Would you like to take that up first?
Sure, that would be fine, Mr. Speaker. That would be the A17. I don't have the number here yet. It hasn't come out
Clerk
yet.
will report the amendment to the amendment.
Loeffler moves to amend her amendment to Senate File Number 444, the unofficial engrossment, and the amendment to the amendment is coded A17-0462.
Call upon the member from Hennepin, Representative Loeffler, to introduce her amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this deals with a totally different topic, and that is about the special authority that we're giving to the Department of Administration to, on special occasions, have liquor provided within the Capitol complex. And the amendment to the amendment before us would make sure that Minnesota products are being sold not just in the cafeteria where it's also allowed under this bill, but also anywhere on the Capitol. Elsewhere in the bill, there's a provision that for the Super Bowl with the St. Paul Ice Castle, that they would be allowed to have a concession on the Capitol grounds under strict rules from the Department of Administration. That would be able to sell liquor products on the grounds of the Capitol and other places. This would simply say that it should be Minnesota products being sold at our Capitol for these special events. We have farm wineries, we have tap rooms and distilleries, we have breweries throughout our state that would like to have their products featured at the grand celebration of the Capitol reopening and the celebration of the Super Bowl. I'd urge your support.
Discussion to the amendment to the amendment. The member from Carver, Representative Hoppe.
Mr. Speaker, members, thank you. Members, I would like to thank Representative Loeffler for all of her work on this issue, and I would encourage a green vote on her amendment.
Further discussion to the amendment to the amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the amendment to the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails and the amendment to the amendment is adopted. Members, we are now on to the amendment, Loeffler Amendment, the 0460. Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this amendment expands the use of capital liquor revenues. We don't think there's going to be a lot of it, but right now in the current bill, it is dedicated to capital preservation. And I think we've all really appreciated the capital preservation efforts and the restoration of our capital. This would add the words "and programming," so it would be capital preservation and programming. One of the goals of the capital restoration was that we would have new spaces available to the public that would increase the public's interest in visiting the Capitol, not just once, but throughout the year. And many of us have gone up to the third floor galleries and seen changing art exhibits. That's going to be an increasing part of inviting people to come in throughout the year to display Minnesota art and stories related to Minnesota. And while so far administration, which has been in charge of this, has been successful in getting some museums and artists to loan their art to us, what we have found is that some artists and some museums will require a small insurance policy to loan it to us for free. And we also think there needs to be some signage, so when you first walk into the first floor of the building, it says, "Please come up to the third floor galleries. Today we're featuring," and gives people some basic information. So it's just some minor costs that we think will help the public rediscover and discover anew the new opportunities to see new experiences within our Capitol building. And I've talked to all the members of the Capitol Preservation Commission, except the Speaker, because he's been a little busy, and all of them, both Republican and Democrat, have agreed that this would be a good thing to do, and the Department of Administration agrees as well. With that, I'd answer questions and appreciate your support.
Discussion to the amendment. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the amendment as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails, and the amendment as amended is adopted. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Howe moves to amend Senate File Number 444, the unofficial engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A10.
Call upon the member from Stearns, Representative Howe, to introduce his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In A10, what that does is allow all jurisdictions to be able to adopt an ordinance to allow in their jurisdiction to allow liquor establishments to stay open till 4 a.m. during the Super Bowl, much the same as we have for Hennepin and Ramsey County. So in the bill, you've got an exemption for Hennepin and Ramsey County to be able to stay open until 4 a.m. This would allow all jurisdictions throughout the state to extend their hours till 4 a.m. if they so choose, only during that period of time. Different from what I had in committee. I had a different amendment in committee, but this narrows the scope and it just allows everyone to enjoy that time if their jurisdictions decide to do so.
Discussion to the A10 amendment. Member from Dakota, Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise to encourage members to oppose this amendment. I appreciate the author trying to narrow the scope, but the fact is we are taking great liberties with our liquor laws in Minnesota, and this is a really important one. Science has shown us again and again and again in the United States and across the world that the more hours that you have intoxicating substances available for purchase, the greater amount of addiction and cost to your system you will have. And so saying that this is just something that localities can choose from locality to locality is very concerning. We did, I believe, have some discussion about public safety with regard to this as well. The State Patrol happened to be there that day. We discussed this in committee, and our Department of Public Safety has great concerns with allowing additional hours of operation anytime year-round. So I oppose this amendment.
Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And DPS Department of Public Safety was opposed to this at that time. They have indicated to me that although they aren't in favor of it, but they are not strictly opposed to it, they said that they could work with this as long as it's just for that spirited time and that weekend.
The member from Pope, Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. And would Representative Howe stand for a quick question?
He will yield. Representative Anderson.
Representative, you talk about the opening hours being during the Super Bowl. Are you talking about the entire week of Super Bowl or the weekend or the Sunday that the game is on?
Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Anderson and members, the time period would be the same as it's open for Hennepin and Ramsey. It would be, I believe, that Thursday to Sunday.
Further discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of the A10 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion prevails. Clerk will report the amendment.
Howe moves to amend Senate File Number 444, the unofficial engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A11.
Representative Howe, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The A11 amendment.
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary procedure. I asked for a division. Did you not hear me on that last vote?
The gavel had fallen, Representative Clark.
I don't think it had.
Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The A11 amendment, in the city of Cold Spring, we have a ballpark that's very active. They've won a number of amateur state championships. They sell beer there, but they can only sell 3-2 beer. What they'd like to do, what this amendment lets them do is...
Mr. Speaker,
Representative Dabney.
one parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, when a voice vote is taken by the body and the speaker has not brought the gavel down and a member requests a division, what is the proper way to get the speaker's attention besides the custom and usage of the body of asking for that from the speaker?
Representative Dabney, a division being requested, we will revert back to the division on that vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All those in favor of the Howe amendment on the A10, please rise. There being 82 ayes, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Clerk will report the next amendment.
Howe moves to amend Senate File Number 444, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A11.
Member from Stearns, Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The A11 amendment, what it does is allows the city of Cold Spring to issue a strong beer license to the ballpark. They have an active ballpark. They sell beer there, but it's only 3-2. They would like to sell the local beer, 3rd Street Brew, at their ballpark. This will allow them to do so. Thank you, members. I ask for your support.
Discussion to the A11 amendment. Member from Carver, Representative Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, I think this is a good amendment. I would encourage a green vote. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the A11 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Omar moves to amend Senate File Number 444, the unofficial engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A12.
I call upon the member from Hennepin, Representative Omar, to introduce her amendment.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair Hoppe, for working with me on this amendment. And this is a simple amendment. This amendment will give the City of Minneapolis the authority to be able to issue a class liquor license to the proposed Malcolm Yards Market Food Hall. It is an innovative, a new food hall that's being put in. And with this, the city of Minneapolis would be able to issue that liquor license. And after the amendment passes and this bill passes, the city of Minneapolis will do an ordinance to further allow this. So I ask for your support. This is really needed in order for this food market to take shape. Thank you.
Member from Carver, Representative Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, I think it's a great amendment. Please vote green. Representative Omar, thanks for bringing it.
Further discussion to the A12 amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor of the A12 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. Motions prevail. The A12 is adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Nash moves to amend Senate File Number 444, the unofficial engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A14.
Call upon the member from Carver, Representative Nash, to introduce his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is a compromise amendment working with many stakeholders, but this is on behalf of the distillers in our state, many of whom you have in your district, all of whom are trying to go from, as they say, from grain to glass. They're trying to employ local folks, and this just gives them the ability to sell bottles up to 750 milliliters out of their facilities, and I would appreciate your vote.
Discussion to the A14 amendment. Member from Carver, Representative Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, again, I think this is a good amendment. Please vote green.
Further discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of the A14 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. Amendment is adopted. There being no further amendments at the desk, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 444, as amended.
Discussion to the bill. Member from Carver, Representative Hoppe.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker and members, I know this has been a little bit of an unusual path this week for the bill. I appreciate your support and would encourage a green vote. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. There being 79 ayes and 54 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. There is a motion at the desk. The clerk will report the motion.
Halverson moves that the rules of the House be so far suspended that House File Number 848 be recalled from the Committee on Government Operations and Elections Policy, be given its second and third readings, and be placed upon its final passage.
Call upon the member from Dakota, Representative Halverson, to describe her motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is my motion. This, for members' recollection, is the bill that I introduced back in February to ratify the contracts, the memoranda of understanding, and ratify the state engineering council contracts so that the employees that have negotiated and are working under current contracts that include pay increases, that include paid family leave, will continue to work under those their current circumstances. If we do not act before the end of the legislative session, our state employees are going to lose their benefits. We had a debate about this several weeks ago, and it was said on the House floor that these folks aren't going to lose benefits. I mistakenly said they were actually going to keep their benefits through the end of the year, but according to the Department of Public Safety Human Resources, they're going to lose their benefits on May 23rd. A reduction in pay, a reduction in leave. People who are out on leave taking care of their babies today are going to have to decide whether or not they come back to work for the state of Minnesota, because they're going to lose their benefits that they planned for. Daycare schedules, daycare contracts that they've signed into are just going to be thrown out the window. All these folks have done all their hard work and planning and negotiated their contracts in good faith. We're going to lose them. And so I ask that the body agree with me and declare an urgency for the people of the state of Minnesota so that they can continue to be served by our state employees, and vote to declare the urgency on House File 848. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hillstrom. The member from Hennepin, Representative Lilly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sorry about that. Ramsey County, though, but I'm glad I'm not from Hennepin, believe me.
Ramsey.
I know that's harsh, but Mr. Speaker, we'd like a roll call on this if we could get it.
A roll call being requested, and seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Lilly from Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hail the Golden Valley Lutheran College.
Hoorah.
Members, so this amendment, I'm glad Representative Halverson's bringing it forward. You know, we're in the last few minutes here of session, and I was surprised. I dug up the bill, or I offered amendment on April 6th, 42 days ago. You know, this clock is really ticking fast now. But, and my amendment was just on the engineers, and you remember I grabbed that, I had read this thing, and I talked about the floods that went down in Representative David's, oh, I'm not supposed to turn, but Representative David's area, and how MnDOT went and helped and saved the day. So these are the engineers we're talking about. These folks are out there doing work every day in all our districts. I was looking through here, and you know, there's water things that they do. They're nursing homes, they're inspecting, and obviously I mentioned road projects, and then fixing the water infrastructure down in Rushford there. But you know, when that Legionnaires disease was hitting St. Louis Park and Joachim's, folks were, you know, obviously concerned, like we all were, because we didn't know where it was coming from. These are the people. These are the engineers that figured that stuff out, the scientists and engineers. So anyways, that's what this, that's what these contracts are, and just to ratify it. And you know, these folks are concerned, you know, so, and obviously you folks are too, because a couple days later then on August 20th, Cornish put in a bill, and I quickly signed on, and about Knobloch, Lomer, and Fenton, and a bunch of you guys, rightly so, signed on to that bill, and that was a engineer's bill. And then mine even had like about 7 of you guys voting on it, and I had a couple of you come up to me and said, hey, why didn't you tell us about it and ahead of time, and we would have voted for it. But here's your chance to do the right thing on to take care of these workers. Just imagine how stressful that is, just not knowing what's going on. And the other part is with the paid parental leave. It's nothing fancy. This stuff's, you know, you guys, a lot of you are endorsed by chamber stuff, and I care about that to myself. But, you know, corporate America is doing this in a big way. 3M, Target, Land O'Lakes, Wells Fargo, Cargill, General Mills, Ecolab, Thomson Reuters, Star Tribune even, Mayo Clinic. These folks are offering parental leave. And it's got like huge polling numbers on it, like 82% to give parental leave to women, especially us men. They fall off a little bit. They don't seem to care that if our men are, they don't apparently trust Representative Lesh to be home as much. But I'm more of a grandfather. But 69% support fathers. Well, anyways, appreciate a green vote on this. Here's your chance to do the right thing. A lot of you did come up to me and said that you wanted to support our state workers, and here's your chance. Just let's do it and get it to the governor, just like we did a Real ID yesterday, and do the right thing.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I want to make it real clear what it is that we're talking about and what's covered. So the Minnesota Government Engineers Council contract is the contract that covers approximately 1,000 employees and 15 job classes and 13 state agencies. And members, this agreement that needs to be ratified is because of an arbitration that took place. In the event that the arbitration, first the arbitrator awarded 3.5% increase in 3 of the 5 classes that were submitted. And in the event that this legislature does not pass this contract, the employees will not be awarded the raises that they actually arbitrated and won. And so, members, this contract is very critical, and it's important that we pass it before the legislative session adjourns. The paid parental leave piece is really critical that the legislature pass before we go home on the 22nd. Because if the legislature doesn't pass that bill by the time we adjourn, the state will not have the authority to provide paid parental leave to employees covered by this agreement. So if you're on paid parental leave right now, and the legislature goes home on the 22nd, you no longer, without passing this, you will no longer have that coverage. So folks that are have small babies at home, they will be prepared to have to come back to work. The legislature can't simply just pass it and make it retroactive and say, oops, sorry, we made a mistake, go back home. So people who are expecting to be able to take care of their babies at home will have to report back to work or decide whether or not they are going to leave us. The first few weeks of a baby's life is critical for bonding for families, and it's important in a child's development. And most licensed child care providers will not accept infants younger than 6 weeks. So members, our employees have planned that they will be home with their babies. And if we do not pass this, we will be saying to them, too bad. So members, this shouldn't be about politics. This shouldn't be about division, and state government employees should not be pawns. So members, let's do the right thing. Let's declare this an urgency, suspend the rules, pass these contracts so our employees don't have to worry whether or not they are going to fall victim to the inability to get a deal on the entire state budget.
The member from Kuchiching, Representative Eklund.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. With the proposed cuts to employees in the DNR and the MPCA and the Environment Bill, I'm concerned about the potential loss of our senior scientists in the agencies if this contract agreement is not reached. We need to be concerned about this for loss of institutional knowledge. Mr. Speaker, members, we need these contracts ratified so we know that our senior scientists will be here in place carrying on the work of the agencies that benefits all the states. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is about us as a state keeping our word, keeping the promises we've made. This is about these contract negotiations. They were negotiated by the unions and these employee groups in good faith with the idea that, okay, they're going to be ratified and we're going to get what we negotiated. And what we as a state said, okay, agreed to, and in this case it went to arbitration with the engineer's contract. It went to arbitration. The arbitrator said, this is the contract, this is what you're going to get. It's us keeping our word and doing what we said we're going to do. And instead of sticking it to a bunch of employees and sticking it to them and saying, we're not going to give you the raise that you won, the raise that you negotiated, and we're just going to let you go back to your old wage. And that's not the way to keep employees, these employees that do the work for the state of Minnesota, these employees that we count on every day to make sure Minnesota works, to make sure our government works, and make sure that when our constituents call up and want something from or want an answer, that there's somebody there with knowledge that can answer that. We're going to say, oh, we don't need you people, you're not worth it. We're not going to stand up to, and we're not going to honor the agreements we make. We're just going to stick it to you, and you're going to have to like it. Well, guess what? They're not going to like it. They're not going to stay. We're going to lose these people. We're going to lose that institutional knowledge. And then we get to a point where our state is not going to work. It's not going to be the state that we know where our government works. And it's a lean government that we have, but it works for the people because they got dedicated, caring employees there that put in extra time and extra hours, a lot of time that they're not compensated for because they care about this state also. But we don't care. We're just going to stick it to them and not going to ratify these agreements. Members, it's time to do this. It's time to suspend the rules and get this done. Thank you.
The member from Wawasha, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, members, we talked about this when this proposal was brought forward earlier, when Representative Lilly brought it. If you will recall, the occurrence of events around this are that the proposal for paid parental leave was brought forward by the governor and his department back last fall to the Subcommittee on Employer Relations through a process that doesn't have grounding in law. And so this interim approval that they have been given by the administration is not legal to begin with. Secondly, if the governor and the unions want to do this, they need to do it as part of the regular negotiating process, as part of the contract negotiations, which they opted last time around not to include this particular coverage in their contract negotiations. Instead, they came forward at the last minute after the contracts were already ratified and wanted to add on yet another benefit, as I mentioned, in a way, through a memorandum of understanding in a way that had never been done before and is not grounded in law. Members, if the unions and the governor want to have these benefits, what they need to do is make them part of the contract negotiation process, which is beginning now, and have that be part of the process that happens between now and when we meet next year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Nicollet, Representative Johnson C.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and time is running out for these benefits. These benefits mean a lot to folks, certainly the contract as well, but I'm going to speak to the paid parental leave. These mean a lot to folks. They mean something to a colleague in this chamber who 35 years ago had to take time off as a state employee, time without pay, and stay with those kids at a time when that family is facing financial hardship. And that colleague is not alone. That was 35 years ago, and we're asking our state employees to do the same today. As you likely know, I have a lot of state employees in my district, and I'm hearing from them. There's some babies going to be born soon, and those mothers are expecting to be home with their child as they should be. It's just the right thing to do. I weight the argument of why it's not a good idea for mothers and fathers to be home with their children as they're born. I can't imagine that an argument being made that would say, oh yes, that's a good idea. We shouldn't have parents home with their kids. I think we want our parents home with our kids. And I think it was a noble effort that the governor took to take the lead on this to establish paid parental leave. It's the sort of thing in my mind that everybody should have. I had it, and I think it's important to have. And again, I keep thinking about that baby that's about to be born just in a couple of weeks. We need to do this now. But again, a lot of those state employees where I live, work at the security hospital. You saw the picture of the person who was injured last night. There's 3 people injured last night. Think about what it's like to attract employees to the security hospital. In a time when we need to have full staffing there, more now than ever, it is hard to attract the employees that we need. We need a lot of nurses. Those nurses can work a lot of different places. The state needs to be very appropriately clever and creative in creating the sort of employment package that we can attract the quality employees to work with the people from your districts, the most vulnerable Minnesotans who are from your districts, who are seeking recovery at the Minnesota Security Hospital. Part of the way we do that is by providing a package of benefits that make it a little more attractive than maybe some other place. And it can really significantly add to our ability to attract needed employees at a very important institution in this state. Paid parental leave needs to be done now so we don't run out of the time. The deadline's facing us. That's why we need to vote for this, to suspend the rules. It's fundamentally the right thing to do. It's the most pro-family thing we can do for our state employees. And it needs to be done now for the Minnesota Security Hospital and the sex offender program in my district, and similar work that's done across the state, the tough work that we ask our state employees to do. We're competing in a very difficult marketplace. We need to include in their package of benefits paid parental leave. Let's vote to suspend the rules. Let's do this today. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Majority Leader Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I would ask members to vote against the suspension of the rules. We still have several days left of session. Representative Lilly, I'm happy to talk to you about this offline. But today, members, I'd ask you for a no vote on the suspension of the rules.
The member from Dakota, Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I have grave concerns with the notion that we got plenty of time to work on this. That's why I'm bringing this forward, and that's why I'm feeling the urgency. Our state employees are feeling the urgency too. If your pay was going to be cut on Tuesday, if you were going to lose 2.5% of your family's income on Tuesday, would you guys be all right with that? No big deal. You know, lucky you if you can weather that. How many people in Minnesota talk about living paycheck to paycheck? I hear from them all the time. People in Minnesota are strapped because of high cost of tuition, because of the high cost of health care, because of what we keep pushing back on the citizens of Minnesota. And here we are telling the employees of Minnesota, you know what, your money's no good here. The way you stimulate our economy and our communities with your paycheck is different somehow than the way other people stimulate our economy. That's just unfair. The fact is this bill was introduced early in session, a hearing was requested, and a hearing was never granted on contracts that were negotiated in good faith by the employees of Minnesota and by the state of Minnesota. Then an amendment was brought forward, and somehow that was ruled out of order. It was very much in order. But once again, we did not debate whether or not the employees of the state of Minnesota deserved the pay increase, deserved the benefits that they negotiated. Representative Skrowski is absolutely wrong that there is no standing for memoranda of understanding to be used in employee contracts. In fact, since 1997, MOUs have been used 700 times to change or pass employee contracts. The fact is the legislature doesn't sit full-time. Thank goodness. All the mischief we'd get into. We have to have options for folks to be able to negotiate outside the legislative session and to have their contracts dealt with. If these folks have a pay cut, it's on everyone who votes not to declare an urgency. We're going to make our Minnesota families suffer more because we're not going to take this up. Part of state employee contracts specifically state MOUs are part of the contracting process. It absolutely has standards in state law. Now, this went to an MOU process because it dealt with all of the employees of the state of Minnesota, all of these contracts. It was a very broad change. And the state of Minnesota and MMB wanted to study it thoroughly. And study it thoroughly they did. And they found out that with this change of paid family leave, we'd be significantly reducing staff turnover in the state of Minnesota. That's a big deal. I often hear government should run like a business. Well, here we are. Here we are with the opportunity to make a really smart business decision for the people of Minnesota and say, we're going to reduce staff turnover because we know, according to analysis by MMB, this is going to save the state millions of dollars. I'm all for saving taxpayers millions of dollars. Let's do it. We got the opportunity today. But if you're not all for saving taxpayers millions of dollars, you should be for employees getting a chance to spend time at home with their babies. We should be supporting our state employees who have new babies through birth or through adoption. That time, your first time with your baby, your first few weeks, that bonding time is so critical for brain development. It's so critical for the parent-child relationship. And there's nothing else like it. All of us here who are parents know there's nothing else like that time. And we're just asking that the state of Minnesota employees don't have to cut that time short, that they don't have to spend that time worrying if they're going to be able to pay the mortgage, if they're going to be able to cover their student loan costs, which they're likely paying. A lot of our state employees have advanced degrees. They're engineers, they're physicians, they're nurses, they're public health workers, they're IT professionals, they're serving us, they're law enforcement officers. And the fact is they provide vital services to the people of Minnesota. And they're not asking for much. They're asking for the Minnesota State Legislature to do their job. They did their job. The state of Minnesota did their job. Everyone came to the table. Everyone got to an agreement. Doesn't that sound good on a day like today when we're facing several hours together in the next few days? Now, I had the opportunity to sit down with a group of state workers, all from DHS. All of the health committees were invited, Republican members, Democratic members. Only Democratic members attended that meeting, which was real disappointing because we heard stories about the impacts of what our state employees are doing. And we heard stories about how hard it is for these employees to continue to choose Minnesota as their employer of choice. We've got talent in our workforce. We've got people who are working to prevent cybersecurity attacks against the people of Minnesota, protecting the data of every Minnesota state employee, every Minnesota state legislator, every patient who is receiving treatment in the state of Minnesota, protecting their data, protecting their privacy against attacks. And we're telling them they don't count. We've got engineers who are working hard to ensure that our infrastructure is in good working order and that the people of Minnesota can count on our roads and our pipelines and our water systems and our sewer systems to work. And you know what? For the most part, they do. You turn on your faucet and the water comes out. It's such a miracle. We don't think twice about this stuff in Minnesota. And then occasionally something does go wrong. Like the city of Blaine having their water tainted. And who was there to make sure that the citizens of Blaine were safe and had drinking water? The employees of the state of Minnesota, the epidemiologists, the public health workers who were testing and treating the water, who were communicating with local government, who were protecting our state employees. But here we are telling them that they don't matter by not ratifying their contracts. These are the folks that serve us. These are the folks that serve our communities. These are the folks that keep us safe, that make sure that we have the Minnesota that we expect. And they do this work in spite of the burdens we continue to place upon them. In spite of the resources we continue to take from them, and they do this work, we need to be an employer of choice in Minnesota. We need to be an employer of choice in this state where our unemployment rate is so very low. Filling vacancies is hard. It's hard for businesses. It's doubly hard for the state. We need to stop employee turnover. This is a proven way to do that. There's estimates that we can stop turnover of female employees by 30% in this state. If we stop that by just 1%, we'll save $4 million. Save your taxpayers money. Keep your promise to run the state like a business, which I hear so often from your side of the aisle. Be responsible. Choose to support families. Vote to declare an urgency. Let's take up this bill. Let's do the right thing for the state of Minnesota.
Member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Representative Halverson, I'm not going to pine on as long as you did, but I will tell you that the MOU process is put into the contracts, and it's been put in there expressly for the purpose of allowing the government and the unions to agree on small changes that need to happen in order to provide for the ability of the contracts and the relationship to work properly. Crossing the I's, dotting the T's, changing a date that was mistaken, those types of things. Yes, 700 times or whatever number you may have had over time, but not once was the MOU process used to provide a brand new wholesale benefit without the ability for the legislature to provide that approval. And that's what the governor did this time. It was illegal, and that's the reason this discussion is in front of us. The right way for this to happen is through the contract negotiation process, as the governor and the unions should have done if it indeed was their priority the last time around. But apparently they had other priorities. So I would encourage us members to reject this last-minute effort to add yet another benefit for these particular groups. Instead, this should be brought forward right now as these negotiating processes are commencing, and the union should bring them forward, or the governor, or whoever wants to bring them. I think they both seem to want them in what seems to be a rather unconventional relationship in negotiating. But if they want them, now's the time to bring them in the negotiation process for consideration in the next round, and that's what we need to do. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Blue Earth, Representative Considine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hear quite often about a lot of you are business owners, and I would be willing to bet money that after you have negotiated a contract with a supplier, with a client, that the vast majority of you would not cheat and would not renege on that contract. Why you are willing to do that to the state workers is beyond me. This contract was negotiated. In fact, it was taken to arbitration so that it was open, transparent, and everybody had their chance to talk about what they needed. It was signed, and now we're not going to ratify it. What is the difference between that and cheating a supplier or cheating a client? I don't know. As for the other part, the member of the, whatever it is, MOM, yeah, whatever. At this point, it is extremely clear that the DFL is now the party of family values and the party of the family. Thank you.
Clerk will the clerk will take the roll on the motion to suspend. Clerk will close the roll. There being 62 ayes and 71 nays, the motion to suspend the rules does not prevail. Announcements. Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 10 a.m. Friday, May 19, 2017.
Representative Pepin moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 10 a.m. Friday, May 19th, 2017. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion prevails. Representative Pepin.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Pepin moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Motion prevails and the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. Friday, May 19th, 2017.